Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Ashley Bassett,
And I'm Dr. Catherine Logan.
and welcome to another episode of Ask the Sports Docs. We get a lot of questions from our listeners each week, and they're awesome questions. So rather than responding individually, we thought we would do these mini episodes where we highlight some of the best questions and our responses. So let's get started. Today's Ask the Sports Docs focuses on a question that we get asked a lot on the sideline, in locker rooms, and specifically by parents of our young contact sport athletes. Do you recommend the use of Guardian caps to decrease the risk of concussion? So, if you've watched NFL training camp over the last few years, you've seen them, those padded shells that sit over the helmets. They're everywhere now in preseason practices.
But the question is, are they actually preventing concussions? Or are we just seeing a visible symbol of safety without meaningful impact? So that's what we're going to tackle today. And to do that, we're going to review a recent article published in the August 2025 issue of AJSM titled An Analysis of Guardian Cap Use and Changes in the Concussion Rate in NFL Preseason Practices from 2018 to 2023.
But before we get into that article, let's start at the beginning. What is a Guardian cap? So, Guardian caps are aftermarket padded helmet covers that attach over a standard football helmet. The model relevant to the NFL is the Guardian Cap NXT, developed by Guardian Sports. Historically, helmet covers go back decades. There was the Pro Cap in the late 1980s and 1990s, but they really never gained widespread adoption.
So the Guardian Cap XT was introduced in 2011. Then in 2017, the Guardian Sports developed the NXT model, specifically designed for NFL and collegiate linemen. And the NXT added an additional layer of vinyl nitrile padding and increased the weight significantly, about 369 grams compared to 200 grams for the XT.
So, how does it work? Well, there are a few different mechanisms that have been proposed, but primarily the Guardian cap acts as a secondary layer that absorbs and dissipates impact energy, thereby theoretically reducing the severity of head hits. By compressing upon impact, they reduce head acceleration, lower peak forces, and reduce rotational velocity transmitted to the head.
But there's a trade-off. So increasing helmet profile could increase tangential forces or alter collision dynamics. And it's impact to note, or I should say, and it's important to note that the biomechanical laboratory studies have shown mixed results. So the XT model did not consistently reduce linear acceleration. The NXT model tested better and showed improved reduction in combined head acceleration metrics, or harm, during their testing at Virginia Tech.
Yes, that Virginia Tech model that Catherine just mentioned suggested a theoretical concussion risk reduction up to 34% when the NXT was added to the helmet, and even more if both players were wearing the Guardian caps. But we know that lab data does not equal real world concussion data. So for the latter, let's get to our paper today. The purpose of the study was simple: to answer the question, did requiring Guardian caps in NFL preseason practices reduce concussion incidents?
Okay, so this is a level 3 cohort study using the NFL injury surveillance system. The authors looked at concussion rates before the mandate, so 2018, 2019, and 2021, and after the mandate, 22 and 23. So 2020 was excluded due to the COVID disruptions. So positions that were required to wear the caps during preseason practices were offensive linemen, defensive linemen, tight ends, and linebackers.
So the authors compared concussion rates before versus after the mandate, required positions versus non required positions, padded versus unpadded practices, and then helmet shell involvement versus face masks or ground impacts. So impacts to the helmet shell or impacts elsewhere in the head or face area that did not impact the shell. So the total sample included 213,595 player practices. That's a lot, with a
Wow.
total of 139 concussions.
Okay. So what did they find? Overall, the concussion rate in the mandated positions decreased 54% in univariate analysis and decreased 62% in the regression model when they controlled for their confounders. So these findings were highly statistically significant, with p-values ranging from 0.001 to 0.004. So huge win.
Yeah, that sounds like a huge win. But then they looked closer, and this is interesting. When they isolated concussions involving helmet shell impacts, meaning they removed the impacts to areas of the helmet that were not covered by the Guardian cap, such as the face mask, there was no significant reduction in concussion rate. So this suggests that the overall drop in concussions was not attributable to the helmet shell padding compression, as is the primary mechanism proposed.
So, super puzzling. Because the Guardian cap should not affect face mask contact concussions, including face mask to ground, face mask to face mask, or face mask to helmet. So the authors suggest that this concussion reduction might be related to the increased weight of the Guardian caps. So that increased mass and increased moment of inertia could potentially reduce head acceleration independently of the padding compression, though, that could be likely to a smaller degree.
Aside from a true protective effect, the author suggested that other factors could be at play, including behavioral change, so players or coaches might have altered practice intensity, risk compensation, so players felt safer and played differently, although I think that kind of goes
Yeah,
right against the gladiator effect, which means if you
agree.
feel more protected, you play more dangerously, so I'm going to call them out on that one.
Yeah,
Random year-to-year variation in concussion rates, that's important to know, and then confounding trends. So it is important to know, interestingly, there was already a downward trend in required position concussion rate before the mandate. So concussions were already going down in those players you mentioned, the linemen, the tight ends, the fullbacks,
yeah.
all those. So is it just continued trend or was it related to the caps?
Yeah, super interesting. And here's another interesting twist. So concussions in non-required positions actually increased 42% after the mandate. Largely, they were ground-related impacts, and that suggests a broader variability and unrelated to like the cap itself.
Yeah, so back to our question today. Do we recommend the Guardian caps? Well, here's my take. So there's an association between Guardian cap mandate and reduced concussion incidents in NFL preseason practices, but causation is not clearly proven, especially when shell only impact loses statistical significance. Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ashley. The data suggests that there could be a benefit, though the mandate is uncertain and the mechanism is, or I should say the magnitude is uncertain, and the mechanism isn't really clearly outlined. So that regression model showed a 62% lower risk overall during required sessions. And it's really hard to ignore that. But when you're isolating those impacts that padding should actually influence, the effect wasn't statistically significant. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
very puzzling, very puzzling. So, it's hard to recommend against,
Right.
use of something that lowers the risk of concussion, but it is hard also to recommend it when you can't really justify the mechanism. So, what are our clinical takeaways today? So, for professional footballers, Guardian caps appear safe. There was no increase in neck injuries, which is important given that added weight that can be associated with, neck strain and sprains, and possible reduction in concussion incidents in high collision positions. For youth or high school football, which is where at least I'm getting the majority of these
Yeah.
questions, the evidence is purely extrapolated. We don't have anything in that demographic. Impact speeds differ and compliance and technique vary. So it's hard to
Yeah.
recommend one way or the other.
Yeah, I would say, like, in my opinion, certainly it seems if something is low risk and potentially beneficial, especially like in a practice setting, many would argue it's reasonable to implement this, but it's hard. Like, I also don't want to overstate. And I think this is where it gets like you have to be responsible that, oh, this is going to prevent things, and that shouldn't be the message. So for me, it's, if someone asks me, are they, is there a risk to using them? I would say, no, it's low risk, but like, it's hard to say they're beneficial. I would just say potentially, and it's certainly not a standalone solution.
Exactly. As you just highlighted, it's just one piece of the multifactorial concussion mitigation strategy. I think still
Yeah,
proper helmet design, which the NFL is, continuing to work
totally.
on, right? And like proper tackle mechanics, right? The,
Yeah,
the the kickoff return rule change so people aren't flying down the field and crashing into each other. I think those are all important things that we need to
yeah,
still be doing and focusing on. But I think Guardian caps are a reasonable addition to that given their low risk nature.
yeah. Agree.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Ask the Sports Docs. Please keep sending us your questions, comments, ideas for future episodes. We really love hearing from you. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube to stay up to date on all things sports medicine. You can also reach us by email at thesportsdocspod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at thesportsdocspod. Until next time.